Okay, Chair, when you're ready, we are now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual Personnel Committee meeting on the 18th of February 2022. I'm your Chair, Councillor Ian Thomas, and I'd also like to welcome viewers to our live stream on YouTube. Could I also remind everyone that due to concerns due to COVID risk, our council's delegated much of its decision-making power to our senior officers for the period to the 11th of May 2022. Consequently, this morning will be a consultative meeting only. However, we will work as closely as possible to normal procedural rules as detailed in our constitution. Our member code of conduct applies throughout the meeting. We also reserve the right to disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. In the event of a failure in the internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. Should we not be successful within 15 minutes, we'll consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you wish to speak, would you please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members present. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with you, please. Councillor Thomas.
Present for the moment, at least.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, I don't see on the call. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott is not on the call. Councillor Bickley, I don't see. Councillor Blakey, no. I've had apologies from Councillor Cahill, so I'll move on to Councillor Desarum, please.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hall is not on the call. Councillor Hayward, I don't see. Councillor Lawrence next, please.
I'm present, Debbie, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon, please.
I'm here, Debbie, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Present, thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. And Councillor Pepper is also not on the call. So, Chair, I can confirm your quorum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Agenda item 1 is public speaking. I don't have any members of the public registered to speak. Is that still the case, Debbie?
That is still the case, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 27th of January. If anybody's got any concerns or wants to raise a question on the minutes, would you please raise your electronic hand? Otherwise, I'd assume you're content to accept them. I see no hands, so those meeting minutes are accepted. Item 3 are apologies. I've got Councillor Cahill's already, Debbie. Are there any new ones?
No, there are no new ones, but Councillor Arnott has just joined the meeting.
Thank you very much. On to agenda item 4, which is declarations of interest. I think we'll take that by exception, just on the basis we've got a short agenda. Do any members wish to declare an interest at this point? If so, could you raise your electronic hand? Councillor Loudon.
Yes, Chair, it's the usual one I give at this committee that as I'm in receipt of a pension from Unison, and Unison is involved in the work that's under consideration here today.
Thank you very much.
So it's a personal interest.
Yeah, so noted as normally. I'm sure Henry's got that one covered. Agenda item 5 are matters of urgency. I've got no matters of urgency identified for this meeting. Agenda item 6 are confidential and exempt items. Again, I have no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. Agenda item 7 is the reward review next steps, which comes forward because there has actually been a change on onto the facts behind the decision we made or the recommendation we made at our previous meeting. So pass this straight across to you, Jo.
Thanks, Chair. So hopefully the report is fairly self-explanatory, but if I just introduce it. So as you know from our meeting in January, we've had external consultants in to undertake initial work to review our pay and grading structure and pay rates. And we shared the initial findings, high-level findings with you at the January meeting. At that meeting, we agreed that we would do further work, but at that point, we were thinking it was going to be around about the £20,000 mark. And if you recall, we talked about using that money as part of the funds that had already been set aside for the new financial year in the budget planning for pay purposes. Following further discussions with the consultants, it's become clear that £20,000 isn't going to be sufficient for what we need to do to get us full set of clear sort of findings and recommendations to be able to take forward to look at our pay and grading arrangements. And the cost is now between 37 and 44 and a half, £37,000, £44,500, as you can see in the report. And at paragraph 3, you can see the steps that we'll be looking at in terms of the work with the consultants on to take that forward. We have considered whether there are elements of it that we could do internally. In fact, that figure, the figures quoted there, have been shaved down slightly from the initial figure that was shared with us by the consultants, because we are going to, we've got a really good relationship, for example, with the trade unions, with Unison, and so some of the initial figure was around sort of consultation, so on, which we've got good relationships, and I would be picking that element up. So this is a slightly reduced figure to the original one that was discussed with them. But we do feel that we do need that external support from a capacity perspective. With myself and the team are very busy with sort of business as usual at the moment. So to be able to pick up this at the same time would be, well, I think it'd be impossible within the timeline that we're looking at. But also having the external consultants, as we found today, helps us in terms of, they're specialists in this field. They've got the wider external context, expertise, intelligence, and so on that is required for this work, and also access to the relevant sort of pay benchmarking, cost modelling, and so on tools that would just make this a lot easier and more efficient to be able to do through the external consultants rather than trying to do it ourselves. So the committee have asked whether they will be happy for those funds of between 37,000 and 44,500 to be set aside out of the overall money that's been set aside for the budget for pay purposes for next year, to take forward this work. If it is agreed, then we will look to start as soon as possible, ideally next week. They've advised it will take around 10 weeks. So if we do start next week, that means we'll have some fully costed recommendations around the end of April, which I think will be helpful, bearing in mind our current recruitment and retention challenges, which is obviously the purpose of this work. So that's really a summary. Any questions or comments?
Thank you very much for that, Jo. Just think that you just reiterating the point is, of course, the additional sum comes within what we hope are our budget figures that are agreed next Monday and Wednesday. So yeah. I've got speakers now. Councillor Allen, John.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jo. Thank you, Jo, for bringing this report to us so quickly. I know you had to turn it around almost overnight, literally. I just want to pick up a few points. The first is your latter point, Chair, about the financial implications, and I'm preempting Councillor Armstrong, and because I know her interest is always double checking about where the money comes from and have we got it. So I think it's quite clear from the element of the report that we are able to proceed should we agree to this amount. So I hope that to preempt Councillor Armstrong interest there, looks like I've done. So yes, reiterating a couple of points that Jo has made just now, because I think it's really important that we get this piece of work right. We, like so many other employers, public and private sector, local and across the country, are struggling at this point to actually attract staff and to attract the right staff as well. It's not just about getting staff in, it's about then being able to keep them. So I very much welcome this report, and that we're now able to move to the next phase of activity. Consultants are never cheap, we know that, and we try to avoid the use of consultants where we can. But I think this is one piece of work where if we relied upon our own resources, one, it would take an awfully long time, and two, no disrespect to Jo or any of her colleagues, I'm not sure that we've got the skills, the expertise, the resources and the data to actually get the right information pulled together. So I absolutely accept the points that Jo has made, and I accept the points contained in this report, and I hope committee will support this so that we can now move on and get to a point where we can then be discussing the outcomes of their labours. So yes, thank you, Chair. Oh, has he gone? He's still.
Who's the vice chair? Anybody remember? Val. Oh.
Sorry, I'll just find my tweet. Yeah, thank you for that, John. I'm just looking at the raised hands. Sorry, does anybody want to come back on that comment? Thank you. I'm just looking at the hands that are raised and who's on the committee. So at the moment, the only hands that I can see raised are committee members. So Councillor Lawrence, would you like to go ahead, please?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just want to make sure that we've thoroughly investigated this. Because we have money in the budget doesn't mean to say we have to spend it. And I would question the wisdom of spending even more money with consultants when residents are going to have to pay more in council tax. I don't disagree that employees of the council should be paid a decent salary, but we appear to be spending a huge chunk of the potential available cash on yet more consultancy. Now, I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me, but I, like many other East Devon residents, worked hard from the age of 16 to the age of 65 and contributed to my state pension to provide for me and my family when it came to retirement. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house, but the present council tax, before any proposed increases, which are imminent, represents almost 45% of my state pension. And it took me 49 years to build that. So before we agree this expenditure, are we absolutely certain that there is no easier and cheaper way to achieve our goal? I would have thought that there would be a number of case studies out there which we could rely on to help us ensure that council employees are adequately rewarded for the work they put in, particularly with the unions helping and benchmarking and so on. I just want to make sure that we're not just chucking money away that we don't need to. Thank you.
Thank you for that point. Yes, I'm always concerned with easy and cheap when it comes to professional pay and conditions. Bruce de Sarum, Councillor de Sarum, would you like to go ahead, please, with your comment?
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much, Vice Chair. I was wanting to focus on item 3.2. Is that essential that we go towards the real living wage employer? I appreciate it's important, but I'm wondering, with the issues of budget that Councillor Lawrence just touched on, although I'm not a pensioner myself yet, I would be concerned about, well, I'd like to see the real living wage, but I don't know whether or not it is something that we could practically do. And I'm wondering whether we could actually keep the cost to within the £37,000 section of the costs where it says 37 to 44. I'm sure if we could keep it to the 37,000, then that could be a reasonable, because I'm very conscious of what Councillor Loudon said about the need to keep staff. And obviously, as we said, consultants are never cheap, but that's why I think we should keep it on as cheap as we can. And also, as we've touched on, some of the work can be done internally, as we have said. And I think that for me, the issue is, are we going to become a real living wage employer, and what will this extra cost be to us? So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you very much indeed, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor de Sarum. Joe, do you want to come back on that one?
I mean, the reference to the real living wage, what I'm proposing, what I've discussed with the consultants, is that as part of the cost modelling, they will look at that as one of the options. So we'll be able to say, right, if we go to a real living wage employer status, this is the cost, this is what the grading structure will need to look like, and this will be the cost. But that will be one of a number of options. So I'm just conscious that I know you've had those conversations before about looking at that. I think this actually gives us a good opportunity to take that forward in terms of looking at the costs, and then whether we go with it or discount it at this point in time.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just lost my list of participants. I'm just that's the first time that's happened to me.
Chair, we have the chief.
Sorry, was just to come back about capacity. The points that have been made about, is there capacity to do it in-house? I think Joe has already explained that people are pretty, you know, we have to reflect on what we've been talking about recently about, you know, there were issues with staff sickness, with recruitment, with lack of people in post. And now we're saying, don't we have more capacity, you know, for the existing officers already to do this work? And I think if you spend time speaking to officers, I think they're pretty got their backs to the wall, as things are.
And as a HR team, I mean, we've got a higher level of recruitments than we would normally have. We seem to be having a high level since I joined, so that's telling on me, but a higher level of employee relations cases, so disciplinaries and grievances than we've had before. So the business as usual work, operational work is pretty full on at the moment. And you know, this is, as you know from our first meeting back in September, this reward review is one of a number of projects that I'd like to take forward to help us with recruitment and retention, things like our brand, employer brand, growing our own workforce, apprenticeships and so on. And if I'm honest, I'm struggling at the moment with all of those projects because of the operational demands. But as I say, it's not just capacity, it's having that expertise. They've got access. I mean, if we wanted to do pay benchmarking, for example, we'd have to pay for the pay benchmarking database to be able to do that. So there would be costs involved, with that.
Thank you. I see Mark Williams, would you like to come in?
Well done, Val.
Hey, Ian, I didn't see. Sorry, I just saw Mark. I think I saw Mark Williams' hand up. Did I see that, Mark?
Yes.
Job. You take it from here, Val. I'll become vice for when the power goes off again.
Well, it was just to specifically respond to both what Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Tasarum said, in the sense that we fully understand and accept the need to ensure we're getting value for money. With regard to this, what I would say though is that, with or without the real living wage considerations, delving into local government pay is a legal minefield, particularly around the Equal Pay Act, which is national legislation, not European legislation, I'd hasten to add. So this is actually, an investment. I think it's money well spent, and in the scheme of things, it will be, in any event, a drop in the ocean compared to the council's overall salary bill, if that helps.
Thank you for that. I'm just looking to see if there are any more speakers or any more comments to be made. I don't see any more hands.
Vice Chair, sorry, I don't.
Oh, I see your hand. Sorry, Councillor Arnott, please go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Edge, Vice Chair, very much. Yes, very briefly, obviously agreeing with everything that, of course, the CEO has just said. He knows much better than me on this. This is vital work. Just to say a little political thing, I hope there isn't a plan to open a front or even a press release on the issue of money spent on consultants by this administration. I do hope so, because I will be opening my bottom drawer over here for the amount of money spent by consultants by the opposition over the last number of years on a few projects that never came to fruition. So I hope that's not the case. I hope we're not politicising the role of consultants. I'm sure Richard isn't. He's more concerned about value for money, which I get. And then the second point is just to ask Joe, really. So this is a new committee, which we must always remember. And we're doing this in a different way. We've got member access to this kind of decisions in a slight. I know a decision like this Simon would have had to have brought it another way, but we're getting to discuss it now. And I'd like to understand what the value of the information is. So in the medium and long term, I understand what the value of the information is in terms of setting short and medium term pay rates as part of the current negotiation round, which is again something I'm not an expert on at all. But it looks to me as if it might be quite helpful in us, I think the first point made there in the papers, in us actually even further understanding our own workforce, which then helps with planning for the future. But am I reading it right, that it's helping your wider analysis?
Yeah, I mean, when we talked with the consultants, we sort of talked from a scale of doing some some little tweaks through to a full scale sort of review of everything, throwing everything up in the air and starting again. And we've come down sort of in the middle because we think, tweaks will not solve the issues. And in fact, we may have, as Mark mentioned, equal pay implications and so on if we don't address this properly. So, we haven't gone to the other end of the scale of throwing everything up in the air and starting again. We will be, working, sort of that midpoint approach really. But yeah, we need to, one of the things they've talked about is have we got, for example, appropriate, the sort of the career progression, enabling that, which, for me will be really helpful then, because it will link really nicely with the grow our own work that I want us to do. So it's things like that, as well as, are we, at the right level within the market for salaries?
Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, just looking down the speakers list, don't see any more hands. So giving everybody a final chance to put their hand up. So now we're looking for recommendations. If there are any recommendations coming forward, if not, I will recommend from the chair that we go forward with the recommendation in the report, just switching, which is that we recommend to council that the pay policy statement for April 2022 to March 2023 be adopted. Oh, Councillor Desara.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. I wanted to say that it's we could put it to the, as I mentioned earlier, to try and attempt to cap the cost at 37,000. Some wording along that line, that they agree to further extend the consultancy work at the sort of not just the cheapest cost, but to be at the most cost-effective price quoted by the consultant. So I think something like that, in order to reassure members who have expressed concerns about the expense of the consultant. So I think something needs to be put in. I'm not a great wordsmith, perhaps, but I think something along those lines needs to be put in to reassure members that we're not simply spending money for the sake of spending money, that we are, trying to be as prudent as we can with the money. So that's the sort of thing, an amendment I was thinking, Chair.
Thank you for that. I see Councillor Loudon's hand is raised. Councillor Loudon, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back to what Bruce has just been saying, and I get absolutely the point. And I think Councillor Arnott's made the point about value for money, and that surely goes with everything that we do. So I would hope that it doesn't need to be laboured, but, I get the point, and I'm sure Mark and Joe get the point absolutely as well. And I find this is a rather... I'm just wondering if I've got out of bed and I'm still dreaming, because, I'm finding myself bizarrely now arguing in favour of using consultants, and my colleagues across the benches, as it were, are almost making the counter argument, and it's playing with my brain, to be quite honest. But the important point here is absolutely, we need to make sure that we, one, get value for money, and two, that we just don't spend money that we don't need to. But I cannot emphasize enough, this sort of work, frankly, at the price that we're looking at paying, as much as it is small fry. When you look at what employers up and down the country, big and small, are having to pay in order to review their pay structures. And it's not about, can we afford, and should we be giving, X group more money? This is not the national pay negotiations. This is about how we look at positioning ourselves to be competitive in what is a shrinking market. And we need to make sure, and I said this earlier, that we put ourselves in the best position to get the right people, and not just get them, to retain them. Because, frankly, any fool can employ somebody. It's about getting the right person and keeping them, and then they deliver value to the organisation. But to go to the absolute point that Bruce has put forward, I accept that we need to make sure that we stay within a budget. I think I would urge caution, excuse me, about trying to link a particular amount of money to this. The report is very clear at section 3 that we're looking at between 35 and 44,500. And I think that as long as we stick within that, then that should be fine. So I get the point about value for money, but I urge caution about trying to put a particular amount of money in there, because for argument's sake, if it comes in at 37.5 thousand, £500 over, you know, are we really saying we can't spend that extra £500, for example? So I understand what Bruce is trying to say, but let's be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that comment. You know, and I think people need to reflect on the cost when you do, you know, we need the right people in the right job. And when that doesn't happen, the cost of advertising, interviewing, you know, those costs, that even that top figure, I would think just one vacancy, you know, or, you know, one vacancy that didn't work out so well, you're losing that sort of money every time you get a staff turnover. So I think we do need to really look at the bigger picture and make sure that this work is right. And actually, what are we talking, the difference between the lower figure and the upper figure? Are we saying that for the, you know, for the difference, or help me out here, for the £7,000, you know, is peanuts if you've got not got the right people in the right job, that money just will be sucked away. And yes, I think actually to put a cap on could possibly be problematic. So now I see Councillor Arnott. Would you like to go ahead, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I think this committee is particularly fortunate because we have in the chair somebody with a huge amount of experience in the private sector in negotiations. We have in yourself, Vice Chair, somebody with a huge knowledge of personnel or HR matters in relation to education and a deep, long understanding of that. And of course, in the portfolio holder, we have somebody who's this huge amount of experience in employment law through union relations as well. And so I'm listening to all of you. I would like to take it. I understand where Councillor Desarum is coming from about finding an amendment. I wouldn't vote for it because if what we do when we're presented with a financial proposal by our officers at every single committee meeting on this council, we insist that there's a parenthesis there saying, but you better keep it to the lower amount, we're going to have to rewrite all of our agendas moving forward. I also think we need to, particularly in the spirit of this new committee, we need to trust, as I do, officers that they're going to get best value in any case. But I understand where Councillor Desarm's coming from, but I'm happy with the recommendation as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, would you like to go ahead, please?
Thank you, Vice Chair. What an excellent job you're doing. I'd like to, I'm really pleased to hear Councillor Loudon's taking the pledge and joining us, joining the private sector as well. But no, but that aside, I'd like to really endorse, which we probably wouldn't have necessarily done in our previous lives, endorse every word that he said. Is absolutely right. The idea of constraining by what in the round is a totally trivial amount is really not helpful. So I say, just to endorse Councillor Loudon's comments, and for actually to progress, we really need a second. If Councillor Desarum's actually proposing an amendment, we need a second to that really before we discuss it. And obviously, if it does receive a second, then we speak to the amendment, and then obviously we need then to vote on whether the amendment becomes part of the substantive proposal. So it's I think, you know, it needs to get past that test at the moment, because of course, if there are no supporters for the amendment, then it wouldn't progress anyway. Then you can put it to bed. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, understood. I just, as it wasn't just as a specific recommendation, more, you know, I thought perhaps we should just chat it over.
No, perfectly fair.
A little bit longer. So, Councillor Armstrong, would you just like to come in with your comments, please?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just really to back up what Councillor Loudon has said and Councillor Arnott and one or two others. And I really do sympathise, because as Councillor Loudon has already said, I'm usually the one that asks about the money and can we afford it and all of that. And I think the 2 points I want to raise are about capacity. that Joe's already said that we don't have the capacity to do this anyway, and not necessarily the full expertise that we need either. So although I really sympathise with what Councillor Lawrence and Councillor De Sarum have said about not spending more than we have to, I think we just have to bite the bullet. I really don't think we've got any choice in this, and I certainly am very much aware of the issues we have with recruitment in certain areas, and as I think I think it was Councillor Arnott said about retaining people as well. So I would be happy to go along with the original amount and make sure that we get the best value for money we can with that, the amount of up to 44,500. I'm happy with that. Thank you. But it is about really the capacity, and that we wouldn't be able to do it. It's Hobson's choice, really. I think we can't do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I'll just remind members that up until a few years ago, staff turnover was at 12%. It's been lower, but the cost of staff turnover, or at that sort of level, is enormous. I mean, I'm sure if one had the time and capacity, you could go back and do a cost benefit analysis. But our turnover, got problems with retention and recruitment and retention, but we are at less levels than we were. Anyway, so I saw, so I know that Mark Williams is waiting to speak, and I know that Henry Gordon Lennox is also waiting to speak. So Mark Williams, if you'd like to come in, please.
Yeah, thank you. So it was just to give an example, really, so members will know, we're desperately trying to recruit capacity for our website development to try and keep it up to date and try and provide more online services. We were exceptionally lucky, we thought, to recruit to one of the 2 vacant posts that we have been advertising. That member of staff, within 3 months is now left to go to an employer within Exeter, at a salary we just can't match, even with market force supplement, really. He's gone to a public sector employer, I hasten to add, not a private sector employer. And immediately the sort of money we're talking about potentially saving, we're going to have to spend in adverts and trying to recruit someone else fundamentally. So that's just a real example that, the bigger scheme of things, which is what the Vice Chair's just alluded to, this is a small fraction of the overall costs of running an organisation, really.
Thank you for that. Henry, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Well, I think as it looks like the proposed amendment is not going to be seconded, I don't think I need to.
Okay, so yeah. So, well, do we want to test that? Does anybody want to? I believe Councillor De Sarum's recommendation was something along the lines of that we cap this spend to the lower figure of 37,500. Are there any seconders for that recommendation? Just looking to see. Don't see any indication that there are, so I don't think that will go ahead. So once again, if nobody else, is anybody else going to come forward with a recommendation? Because if not, I'm going to come forward from the chair and recommend to council that the pay policy statement for April 2022 to March 23 be adopted.
I don't think it's the pay policy statement.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Am I reading the wrong?
Yeah, it's, that the Personnel Committee agreed to further external consultancy work being undertaken on the reward review in line with the revised costs, which is set out in the report. So that's the recommendation that will go to council.
Thank you. Having a hot flush. Thank you. Sorry. So can we go to a vote on that, please? If you'd like to.
Yep, members of committee, if you can use your green ticks if you're in support, red cross if you're against, and raise your electronic hand if you're abstaining. Thank you. So for the benefit of those watching online, the vote is now taking place. And Vice Chair, I have a result of 7 votes in support, no votes against, and 1 abstention. So that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings our meeting to an end. And I would like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. And until then, your comments will be live to the public. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.